Okay, so ready to dive into something a little different today.
Yeah,
A
definitely.
topic that maybe, isn't discussed openly all the
I
time.
think a lot of people are curious, though.
Absolutely. So we're going to be looking at the adult toy industry.
Yeah. We've got some really fascinating sources on this.
I'm excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, I think you'll be surprised by what we find.
I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
So, I think we've all heard like whispers and rumors,
Right.
but what we're going to try to do is really get to the real stories.
Yeah, and some expert insights. Try to bust some myths along the way.
Definitely. Let's start with
Okay.
this idea of like walking into an adult store, right?
Hmm.
One of the sources talks about this funny story about a customer who tried to use a remote-controlled toy,
Oh.
like a TV remote.
Oh, wow.
Like they just didn't quite get it.
Yeah, it actually kind of speaks to something, though, that's really important
Right.
about the industry. It's
Yeah.
that employees really play this big educational role. They're not just salespeople,
Right.
they're really guides for people.
Especially for people who are new to this world.
Exactly.
It's like anything new, there's a learning curve.
Definitely.
Speaking of learning curve, one source mentioned this sensitivity test
Mm-hmm.
where you're supposed to put the vibrator against your nose. Is it really a thing?
It is. It sounds crazy, I know. But
What?
yeah, the skin on your nose is super sensitive, and it can give you a sense of like how strong the vibrations are
Okay.
before try it out somewhere else.
Wow, I did not know that. But beyond those kind of funny little details,
Yeah.
a lot of these sources really emphasize the deeper benefits of these products.
Right. It's about so much more than just, a quick thrill.
Yeah.
We're talking sexual wellness, self-discovery, improving intimacy.
Right, like understanding your own body.
Exactly. How to
Yeah.
communicate what you like.
Yeah, I really like this one quote. One expert said that communication and technique actually matter more than size.
Yes.
That's a pretty empowering message, I think.
Absolutely. It really challenges those societal pressures that we all face
For sure.
and puts the focus back on connection and pleasure.
Where it should be.
Right.
It's interesting, one of our sources mentions that online sales of adult products just like skyrocketed during the pandemic.
Yeah, it makes you wonder why, right?
Was it just because of lockdowns and people being, stuck at home?
It's probably part of it, but the sources suggest that maybe there's something deeper going on.
Okay.
Maybe a shift in how people are thinking about these things.
Like people actively seeking out ways to enhance their experiences.
Exactly.
Uh,
Not just filling a void, but looking for more pleasure,
More connection.
both solo and with partners.
Right. And that kind of makes you think, is the industry becoming more mainstream?
Possibly, yeah.
But then there's still this like hush-hush element to it.
Absolutely. Still a lot of secrecy and even shame.
And that's kind of what makes this deep dive so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's about breaking down those taboos.
Okay, so let's get into some of these taboos. One misconception that comes up is this idea that adult toys are just for people in unhappy relationships,
Oh, yeah, that old chestnut.
like it's a last resort or something.
Right, exactly.
But our sources actually say the opposite is true.
Yeah, many couples actually find that using toys can actually make their relationship even better.
More intimate.
It can bring a sense of exploration and fun.
So it's not about replacing intimacy, it's about enriching it.
Yeah, exactly.
And for people who are single, it can be a way to understand their own bodies better.
Without shame or judgment, yeah,
It's all about like taking control of your own pleasure.
definitely. And doing it safely.
Yeah, always important.
Which is why, it's crucial to choose products made from good materials like silicone
Okay.
and always, always, always prioritize hygiene.
Speaking of hygiene,
Yeah?
one source told this hilarious story
Okay.
about a customer who tried to return a toy because they said it didn't feel right.
Uh-oh.
And it turned out they had never even turned it on.
Wow.
They hadn't taken the batteries out of the packaging or anything.
It happens.
I guess even in this industry, sometimes the simplest things can trip us up.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a good reminder to not take ourselves too seriously.
Absolutely. And it brings us to another really interesting aspect of this whole thing,
What's that?
the business side of it.
Oh, okay. The adult toy industry as a business.
Yeah. It's a world with its own, quirks and challenges.
Tell me more.
One thing that came up a lot is that customers often just don't understand how certain products are supposed to be used.
Okay.
So you have these employees who are constantly explaining things,
Oh, interesting.
guiding people towards the right choices.
It's almost like they're therapists in a way.
It's true. Sometimes they are. They're offering emotional support too, helping people navigate these sensitive topics.
Right, so it becomes more than just a transaction. It's
Definitely.
about building trust.
Yeah, creating a safe space for people to explore.
Wow, it really makes you realize that behind every product,
Yeah,
there's a whole story.
there is.
And behind every story,
Yeah,
there's a person.
that's beautifully put.
I feel like we're just getting started.
Oh, there's so much more.
What else have we got?
Let's talk about the sheer variety of products out there.
Okay.
Something for everyone, really, catering to all sorts of different preferences.
Right, and orientations.
Yes. Inclusivity is huge in this industry.
It is, and it's really great to see that.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that sexuality is a spectrum and everyone deserves to have their needs met.
Speaking of needs,
Yeah.
I bet some people listening are thinking, okay, but how do I actually choose the right toy for me?
That's a great question. And honestly, the best advice is to keep it simple.
Don't overthink it.
Exactly. Think about what you want to explore and start with something that feels comfortable and maybe a little intriguing.
So you don't have to jump into the deep end right away.
Not at all. There are tons of beginner-friendly options.
And it's a journey, right? You can explore and try different things over time.
Absolutely. It's all about figuring out what you enjoy.
One source even suggested starting with a small vibrator or maybe a basic dildo.
Yeah, those are great starting points. They're versatile, easy to use, and they come in all sorts of varieties.
Okay, makes sense.
The most important thing, though, and I can't stress this enough, is to choose toys made from body-safe materials.
Like silicone?
Exactly. Silicone is hypoallergenic, easy to clean.
Safe.
Exactly. Much safer than things like jelly or PVC.
Got it. So safety first.
Always. And just like anything else, good hygiene is crucial.
I mean, that's true in general, but especially here.
Right. Wash your toys thoroughly, before and after each use.
Okay.
Think of it like brushing your teeth.
Good analogy.
Just part of taking care of yourself.
Makes sense. Makes it less intimidating, too.
Right. And if you're ever unsure about how to clean something, just check the instructions.
Okay, so we've covered choosing a toy,
Uh-huh.
cleaning it. Yeah, but now what about actually using it?
All right, so the most important thing is to relax.
Yeah.
Take your time. There's no need to rush.
Just enjoy the process.
Exactly. Focus on what feels good.
I feel like that's good advice for anything, really.
It is. And remember, it's totally okay to experiment.
Oh, yeah?
Try different positions, different speeds, different pressures.
See what you like.
Exactly. It's all about discovering yourself.
Okay, now this is something I'm curious about. What if someone is a little bit hesitant to bring toys into their relationship?
It's understandable.
How do you even start that conversation with your partner?
The key is open and honest communication.
Just talk about it.
Exactly. Explain why you're curious.
Why do you think it could be fun?
Yeah, frame it as a way to enhance your intimacy, not to fix something.
I like that.
If your partner is hesitant, just listen to their concerns.
No pressure.
Right? Maybe you could share some educational resources with them or just have an open conversation about fantasies.
Right, just really understand each other.
It's all about trust and finding what works for both of you.
Absolutely, and even if your partner isn't into it,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean anything's wrong.
Exactly. You can still explore on your own if you want to.
It's about respecting each other's boundaries.
Absolutely. And, all of this brings us to a really interesting aspect of this whole topic,
What is that?
the business side of the adult toy industry.
Okay, so we talked about the educational role that employees play,
Right.
but I'd love to hear more about the day-to-day reality of working in this field.
Oh, it can be quite a ride.
Really?
One source talked about the challenge of dealing with customer misconceptions
I bet.
and that fine line between providing information and also being respectful of people's boundaries.
I can imagine that takes a lot of tact.
It does. Employees have to answer some pretty sensitive questions sometimes.
Yeah.
Give guidance without judging,
Yeah.
and sometimes, deal with some pretty awkward situations.
Handle it all with grace.
Exactly. It takes a special kind of person to do this job well.
I can imagine.
You need to be knowledgeable, compassionate, comfortable talking about these things openly.
Speaking of open and honest, this is funny. One of our sources told this story about a customer who returned a toy because it wasn't working.
Oh, no.
And they hadn't taken the battery protector off.
Oh, that's a classic.
It's just like, we all have those moments, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It shows that even in this industry, sometimes the simplest things trip people up,
It does. It's also a good reminder to not be afraid to ask questions.
no matter how silly they seem.
Exactly. Most employees are happy to help.
I love how much humor seems to be present in this industry.
Oh, it's essential. It helps diffuse awkwardness.
Makes things a little less intimidating.
Exactly. It's healthy to laugh.
For sure. Now, let's talk about something that we've kind of been touching on throughout this whole conversation.
Okay.
The fact that the adult toy industry is changing.
It is. It's not your grandmother's industry anymore.
So true. What are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing?
Well, one we've already touched on is online sales.
Right. Huge.
It's really changed the game.
Yeah.
People can access these products discreetly.
In the comfort of their own home.
Exactly. And I think it's removed some of the stigma, too.
Yeah.
It's more anonymous, less potential for embarrassment.
Plus, it opens up access for people who don't live near a physical store.
Right. Accessibility is so important.
It is. And another trend that I think is really exciting is the focus on inclusivity.
Yes. It's fantastic to see the industry becoming more diverse.
In every way.
In the products, the marketing, the voices being represented.
It's about recognizing that sexuality is a spectrum.
Absolutely. And making sure everyone feels seen and catered to.
I love that it seems like this industry is really moving in a positive direction.
I think so, too.
Becoming more open, more accepting, more empowering.
It's exciting to see how these changes are impacting not just the products, but also how we talk about sexuality as a society.
Wow, okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
The practical stuff, like choosing a toy, cleaning it, but also the bigger picture stuff.
Yeah.
Like relationships, personal growth, even societal norms.
It's been a fascinating exploration so far.
It really has.
And I think we've only scratched the surface.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to go back to this one thought-provoking question that came up.
Yeah.
What is the impact of adult toys on society as a whole?
That's a big one.
It is, but how do they challenge those traditional norms
Right.
and push those boundaries of what's considered acceptable?
Well, on one hand, they can be seen as a threat to traditional views of sexuality.
Oh, how so?
Because they challenge that idea that sex is just for procreation or should only happen within marriage.
I see. So they open up this whole realm of pleasure for pleasure's sake.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly liberating for some people.
Especially people who have been shamed or marginalized for their desires.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, I can see how some people might be concerned about the commodification of sex.
Right. There are valid concerns there, too.
About things like objectification, unrealistic expectations.
Even addiction.
It's a complicated issue.
It is. And I think it's important to acknowledge all of those different perspectives.
I have these conversations.
Exactly. And remember that the impact of these products ultimately depends on how we use them.
And how we talk about them.
Exactly.
So, what are your thoughts on this so far? Anything resonating with you in particular?
What stood out to me the most is this emphasis on communication and self-discovery.
Yeah.
It's not just about the toys, it's about using them as a tool for growth.
Understanding yourself better.
Exactly, and I think that's really powerful.
I agree, and it's a message I think we need to share.
Definitely.
There's nothing wrong with exploring your sexuality.
Or seeking out information.
And trying to live a happier, more fulfilling life.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, if you need help along the way, don't be afraid to ask for it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Talk to a partner, a therapist, even a knowledgeable employee at an adult store.
There are resources out there to support you.
And don't underestimate the power of community, too.
Oh, right.
There are online forums, support groups, places to connect with others.
It's about finding your tribe.
And creating that safe space to explore.
Well said.
Now, as we come to the end of this part of our conversation, I want to leave you with something to think about.
All right, hit me with it.
Okay, so we've talked about the individual benefits of exploring sexuality, but what about the ripple effects on society? How do these products change the way we think about pleasure, intimacy, relationships?
Wow, that's a really interesting question.
It is. Do they have the power to shift those attitudes in the long term?
I mean, it makes you wonder what the future holds for this industry.
It does.
And how it will continue to evolve alongside our evolving views on these topics.
It's fascinating to think about.
It is.
And it shows that this conversation is far from over.
So true. There's always more to explore, more to learn.
Exactly. So I encourage you to keep asking questions, keep challenging those assumptions.
And remember, there's no right or wrong answer.
It's about finding what feels good for you.
And embracing your own unique journey.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the adult toy industry.
It's been so interesting.
We'll continue the conversation soon, but for now, stay curious.
And stay open-minded.
Absolutely.
Pleasure is a right, not a privilege.
I love that.
Well, we'll be back with more on this topic soon.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, so we're back, and we're going to get into how adult toys can actually impact relationships and personal growth.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
I'm ready. So one thing that our sources talked about was how these products can actually be a really powerful tool for communication and relationships.
Right, and you might not think of it that way at first.
No, not really.
But think about it. Using toys can help you start conversations about things like desire and boundaries.
Oh,
What you like, what you don't like.
it's like it gives you something concrete to talk about.
Exactly. It can break down those barriers that sometimes prevent us from being really honest with each other about our sexuality.
That makes sense. It's like a starting point.
And it can help you understand each other's needs and preferences so much better.
Yeah, one of the sources mentioned that toys can be particularly helpful for couples who are dealing with what's called mismatched libidos.
Right, and that basically means that the partners have different levels of sexual desire.
Okay, so one person might want to be intimate more often than the other.
Exactly, and that can obviously lead to tension and frustration.
So can toys help with that?
They can, in some cases, they can provide an outlet for the partner with a higher libido
Right.
while still allowing for intimacy and connection.
So it's not about one person having to completely change their needs.
Well, right, but it's
Yeah.
important to remember that toys aren't like a magic solution.
Okay.
You still need that open communication and a willingness to compromise.
It's about addressing the underlying issue, not just covering it up.
Exactly, and approaching the whole thing with sensitivity and respect for both partners.
Absolutely. Now, another thing our sources talked about was how these products can help individuals explore their own sexuality.
Yeah, and that's such an important part of personal growth.
In what way?
Well, by experimenting with different things, different sensations, different techniques, you can start to learn what feels good for you.
And what you enjoy.
Exactly. And that kind of self-awareness can really boost your confidence.
It's like you're taking ownership of your pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. And that can lead to a much more fulfilling sex life, whether you're single or in a relationship.
This is all so fascinating, but I have to admit, I still have some questions about the potential downsides.
I think that's natural.
Like, is there a risk that using toys will become a crutch?
Yeah, that's a common concern.
Or that it will somehow replace the need for a partner?
Right, but the truth is that these are just tools.
Okay.
They can enhance intimacy, but they don't replace human
It's
connection.
all about balance.
Exactly.
Using them in a way that feels healthy and positive for you.
Right, and if you're ever feeling unsure, talking to a therapist or a sex counselor can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's good advice. Okay, so we've talked about the benefits, we've addressed some concerns,
Mm-hmm.
but let's get practical for a minute.
Okay.
How do you actually choose the right toy for you?
Right, because there are so many options.
It can be overwhelming.
Yeah, my advice is to start simple. Don't overthink it.
Okay.
Just think about what you want to explore
Yeah.
and choose a toy that seems interesting to you, something you're comfortable with.
So don't need to go for the most expensive fancy thing right away.
Not at all. Start with something basic, and remember, it's a journey. You can always explore more later.
I like that.
Hmm.
One source recommended starting with a small vibrator or a basic dildo.
Those are great options. They're pretty versatile and easy to use.
And I guess they come in lots of different varieties.
Yeah, tons of shapes, sizes, materials, so you can find something that suits you.
And speaking of materials,
Yes, this is crucial.
our sources really emphasize choosing toys made from body-safe materials.
Absolutely. Silicone is the gold standard.
Why is that?
It's hypoallergenic, non-porous, easy to clean.
So it's hygienic.
Exactly. Stay away from things like jelly or PVC. They can harbor bacteria.
Got it. So safety and hygiene are top priorities.
Always. Take care of your toys just like you take care of your own body.
I love that analogy.
It's all about self-respect.
Okay, so now we've covered choosing a toy,
Yeah,
cleaning it.
right.
Now, how do you actually use it? Any tips for beginners?
The biggest tip is to relax, take your time.
No pressure.
Don't try to force anything. Just focus on what feels good in the moment.
Be present.
Exactly. And it's okay to experiment, try different things, see what you like.
This is starting to sound like good life advice in general.
It is. And if something doesn't feel right, just stop, adjust.
Your comfort is the most important thing.
Absolutely. Now, I know some people might be a little hesitant about bringing toys into their relationship.
It's a big step.
It can be. The key is to talk to your partner.
Openly and honestly.
Exactly. Tell them why you're curious, why you think it could be a fun thing to try together.
So you're not trying to fix anything.
Right. It's about exploring together, maybe deepening your connection.
What if your partner isn't into it?
Well, Just listen to their concerns. Don't pressure them.
Okay.
Maybe you could share some information with them, have a conversation about fantasies.
It's about finding what works for both of you.
Exactly. And remember, even if your partner doesn't want to use toys, that's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with exploring on your own.
It's all about respect.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the business side of things.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about education, but I
Mm.
want to dive into some more of those day-to-day realities of working in this field.
Okay, tell me everything.
It's interesting. One source talked about the challenge of dealing with customer misconceptions.
Oh, yeah, I bet there are a lot of those.
There are, and it's about finding that balance between being informative and also being respectful.
It's a delicate line.
It is. Employees have to answer some pretty personal questions sometimes
I can imagine.
and offer guidance without being judgmental.
It takes a certain type of person to do that.
It does. You need to be knowledgeable, compassionate, and comfortable talking about these things openly.
Speaking of open and honest, one of our sources told this hilarious story about a customer who returned a toy because it wasn't working.
Oh, no. What happened?
They hadn't taken the battery protector off.
Oh, that's classic. I bet that happens more than you think.
I guess so. It's just a funny reminder that we're all human.
It is. And it shows that even in this industry, the simplest things can trip people up.
It's also a reminder to just ask questions if you're not sure about something.
Right. Most employees are happy to help, even if it seems like a silly question.
One thing I've noticed about this whole industry is that there seems to be a lot of humor involved.
Oh, yeah. Humor is essential.
What do you think that is?
Well, it can definitely help to diffuse awkwardness.
Make things feel a little less intimidating.
Right. And let's be honest, sometimes you just have to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Totally. Okay, so let's talk about something we've been circling around this whole time.
Okay.
The fact that the adult toy industry is changing.
It's evolving. Definitely not what it used to be.
What are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing?
Well, one we've already mentioned is the rise of online sales.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's changed everything, People can buy these products discreetly from their own homes.
No judgment.
Exactly. And I think it's made it easier for people to explore these things without feeling embarrassed.
And it's opened up access for people who might not live near a physical store.
That's a really important point. It's about making these products available to everyone.
Another trend that I'm really excited about is the focus on inclusivity.
Me too. It's fantastic to see the industry becoming more diverse,
Yeah.
representing a wider range of people and preferences.
It's about recognizing that sexuality is a spectrum.
Yes. And making sure everyone feels included.
It seems like the industry is moving in such a positive direction.
I think so. It's becoming more open, more accepting.
Empowering.
And it's exciting to see how these changes are impacting not just the products themselves, but also how we talk about sexuality as a society.
Wow, okay, so we've covered so much today,
We have.
from the nitty-gritty of choosing a toy and cleaning it,
Right.
to these big-picture conversations about relationships and personal growth.
Even societal norms.
It's been a really fascinating exploration.
It really has, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
But before we wrap things up for today, I want to circle back to this one thought-provoking question that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
What is the impact of adult toys on society as a whole?
That's a big one.
It is? Do they challenge traditional norms?
Right.
Do they push the boundaries of what's considered acceptable?
I think in some ways they do, They challenge the idea that sex is only for procreation or should only happen within marriage.
So they open up this whole new way of thinking about pleasure,
Exactly. And for some people, that can be really liberating.
especially for those who have been shamed or judged for their desires.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I can see how some people might be concerned about the commodification of sex. Right? There are valid concerns about things like objectification.
Unrealistic expectation.
Even addition.
It's complex.
It is, and I think it's important to have these conversations and acknowledge all sides.
But we need to talk about these things.
And remember that the impact of these products really depends on how we use them.
And how we talk about them.
Exactly.
So what's resonated with you the most throughout this conversation?
I think what's really stood out to me is this emphasis on communication and self-discovery.
Me too.
It's not about the toys themselves, it's about using them as a tool for growth.
For understanding yourself better.
Exactly, and I think that's a really powerful message.
It is, and I think it's a message we need to share.
We do.
There's nothing wrong with exploring your sexuality.
Right. Or seeking out information.
And trying to live a happier, healthier life.
I couldn't agree more. And don't be afraid to ask for help along the way.
Yeah, that's important.
Talk to a partner, a therapist, even a knowledgeable employee at an adult store.
There are resources out there to support you.
And there's also a lot of power in community.
Right, like those online forums.
Yeah, support groups, places where you can connect with others who share your interests.
Finding your tribe.
Exactly, and creating a safe space to explore.
Well said. Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay, hit me.
We've talked about the individual benefits of exploring sexuality, but what about the ripple effects on society?
Interesting.
How do these products change the way we think about pleasure, intimacy, even relationships in the long run?
It's a big question, and it makes you wonder what the future holds for this industry.
Right, how we'll continue to evolve alongside our evolving views on these topics.
It's fascinating to think about.
It really is, and it shows that this conversation is far from over.
There's always more to learn.
Exactly, so keep exploring, keep asking questions, and challenge those assumptions.
And remember, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to sexuality.
It's about finding what feels good for you.
And embracing your own journey.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the adult toy industry.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back soon with more.
Can't wait.
Well, that was a lot to take in.
It was, wasn't it?
I feel like we just went on this incredible journey.
We did. We really did. Through this whole industry.
What really stood out to me was how much we talked about education
Yeah.
and communication.
Those are key.
It's not just about the products themselves.
No, not at all.
It's about using them as a way to learn about yourself
Exactly.
and to create deeper intimacy, whether it's with yourself or with a partner.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things I'm taking away from all this is that this industry is about so much more than just pleasure. It's about empowerment, self-acceptance, challenging those old societal norms.
It's really amazing to see how these products can lead to these bigger conversations about sexuality and relationships.
It is, and it's encouraging to see how the industry is evolving, too.
Yeah, becoming more inclusive, more diverse.
More accessible.
It feels like we're moving towards a more open and accepting society when it comes to sex and pleasure.
I think so, too. We've come a long way.
We have, and let's not forget all the humor we found along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Those stories about customer mishaps and awkward moments.
Right.
They remind us that we're all human, even when it comes to something as personal as sexuality.
It's true. It's good to laugh at ourselves sometimes.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought.
All right.
We've talked about all the individual benefits, but what about the bigger picture?
The ripple effects.
How do we keep challenging those outdated norms and create a world where people feel more comfortable talking about pleasure and intimacy?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's a conversation that we need to keep having.
Absolutely. And hopefully our deep dive has played a small part in opening up that dialogue.
I think it has, by shining a light on this topic that's often seen as taboo.
We've created space for more honest conversations.
And hopefully encouraged our listeners to embrace their own journeys.
I hope so too. Remember, there's no shame in exploring your desires.
Or asking for help.
Or finding what feels good for you.
So keep learning, keep growing, and keep talking about these things.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the adult toy industry.
It's been such a fascinating exploration.
Until next time, stay curious and stay empowered.
And remember, pleasure is a right, not a privilege.